Here's what not to do when you own a pawn shop.
Yeah, listen to her purr. To the Batcave. This is the best day of my life.
Hi and welcome to Screen Hub, where today we'll be looking at 10 times that the Pawn Stars got incredibly screwed over, either by a seller or by themselves. Willie Mays game-worn jersey. The red flags for this buy were clear from the very beginning when Corey took the risk of spending $31,000 for a supposedly game-worn Willie Mays San Francisco Giants uniform from 1961. For one, Chumlee shared his skepticism of the item right away. Willie Mays is a baseball icon. He would slide around in the dirt and grass all the time, making exceptional plays, so you'd probably expect at least a few stains to be on it. Well, to have no authentication paperwork either should be a good enough sign not to make that purchase. But Big Hoss took the gamble anyway. So remind me never to go to the casino with that guy. The post-purchase aftermath was awful as well. After failing to retail the so-called jersey at a god-awful asking price of $80,000, by the end, they only managed to make a return of $19,200 2 years later at an auction. To add insult to that injury, to the poor sap who purchased the uniform at the auction as well, it was then reported that the uniform had never even belonged to Willie Mays. It was a simple salesman's sample with an estimated worth of about $2,000 to $3,000. And while the store did manage to keep their losses to a minimum, they still took a hard punch at just under $12,000. Face the music. Chumlee seems to be the fall guy for whenever something goes wrong in the shop, and it's usually deserved. Left alone at the counter, Chumlee was offered a Gibson mandolin. Sadly for him, it was one of the thousands of fakes that make their way across the United States, and was an A model with the Gibson on the headstock in the old script. It does hold the edges of a water slide decal, which were quite visible, and it was stamped a modern script Gibson logo that was visible through one of the F holes. Beyond that, it just didn't really look right. Chumlee would buy it for $1,500, even though his purchase limit is $1,000, for obvious reasons. It would then later be appraised by a music shop friend at just being $100.
Guy in a suit comes in the pawn shop, got a big set of diamond earrings.
Stolen earrings. In a small History Channel segment, Rick Harrison once shared that what was the possibility of his biggest loss yet. It happened one day as a classy-looking fellow would walk in, looking to pawn off a pair of diamond earrings that he had bought. And those earrings, they were a doozy. While Rick did ask all of the right questions, the seller gave all of the right answers, and he even had a receipt. At that point, you just have to think they're real, right? Well, so as agreed upon, Harrison would cough up $40,000 for the pair of diamonds, and 3 days later, the police would show up. Because as it turned out, the jewelry had been stolen.
Asked him all the questions, he even had a receipt. I gave him $40,000. 3 days later, the police took him from me. That was the biggest bust I ever had in the pawn shop.
In the end, the victim thankfully got her diamonds back, and the criminal paid the price. But unfortunately for Harrison, so did he.
Oh, this is your guitar?
Yes.
Okay.
It's a 1961 Fender Stratocaster.
Vic Flick guitar. A 1961 Fender Stratocaster guitar was once brought in by a legendary studio musician named Vic Flick. And because it was graced with such amazing talents, coupled with the history behind it, Rick had purchased the guitar for an outstanding $55,000. Now, the odds are that you've probably heard a song here and there where this very guitar would be used, and you just didn't know it. And that was the issue. Vic Flick, well, he wasn't exactly a popular household name, which is why he even went unnoticed by Rick at first in his segment. So when Rick would set the guitar's resale value at around $90,000 in the shop, it collected a lot more dust than anything else. Then came the time to an auction where Rick made a huge $100,000 loss overall. What hit most though was that his $35,000 loss on the Stratocaster when a $20,000 bid had won it. Ouch.
One of the biggest losses I probably ever took in this business is back when CZs first came out.
Diamond Doppelganger. The old man claims that fake diamonds are what has cost him the most. First hitting markets in the late 70s and early 80s, cubic zirconia, which is a clean-cut synthetic diamond, would trick an unimaginable number of pawn shops all over the country. At that time, the rocks were just coming out to market, and whenever tested, would come up as being 100% real diamonds. As there was an uproar of zirconia, plenty of pawn shops would take a hit, including their own, which took a loss of about $30,000.
Bought a bunch of them. I lost close to $25,000–$30,000 on that, but it was a lesson learned.
The diamond doppelgangers aren't really much of an issue these days, and the Pawn Star's very own Big Hoss even filmed a PSA about zirconia and how to differentiate them from the real thing. In short, zirconia are too perfect, meaning that if they don't have even the slightest of a scratch or a dent, then they're going to be fake. To be sure, it's a wise decision to examine the rocks carefully under a magnifying glass, or even just ask an established jeweler.
You want to know the difference between these two Rolexes right here? This one's worth $2,500. This one's worth nothing.
Fake Rolexes. While Big Hoss practically grew up in the pawn shop as a young boy, he did have to deal with the hardships on his own when first working there. When he first began working the night shift at the age of 18, he wasn't exactly sure what to expect. And typically, around that age is when you're most naive and you think that you know everything. Word probably did get around about the new kid in the shop, and in a single week, Big Hoss bought 6 fake Rolexes, totaling out to be a hefty loss of $4,000 for both him and the shop.
And it must have got around town pretty quick because I bought 6 fake Rolexes in 1 week. I thought I was doing a great job, so I only spent about $4,000 on the 6 fake.
A not-so-strong box. Of all the Pawn Stars, Rick is probably the last one you're going to expect to make a purchase without getting the piece authenticated first, but especially with something he's not familiar with. Well, a hard lesson learned. Dropping a questionable $450 on what he thought was to be an authentic 19th century Wells Fargo strongbox, Rick's hopes and dreams were then locked away by a history expert who called the box a complete fantasy piece with just a slight twist of a knife, and then he named it to be one of the most faked items out there. Included in the box as well were 2 ball and chain sets from the Yuma and Folsom prisons, but good old Rick recognized them as fakes right away. So, that really should have been the dead giveaway, and the owner was so incredibly defensive about the items at the same time. Both are red flags. The Hendrix miss. Guitars aren't really an uncommon item when you stroll through a pawn shop, but when someone claims to be the owner of one of Jimi Hendrix's collection pieces, you can't really help but show your excitement. Learning from his previous mistakes, Harrison then brought in a music expert by the name of Jesse Amoroso of Cowtown Guitars. Amoroso did confirm that the '63 Olympic White Fender Stratocaster was played by Hendrix. It had all the scuffs, all the marks, all the history, as well as the historic photos, documents, and the all-important serial number. Ultimately, the expert came to a ridiculous estimate of about $1 million. So naturally, Harrison would try to lowball the seller and make a hefty profit. However, our long-haired friend was only willing to go as low as $750,000. The man does know his stuff, and he's a smart guy, and Harrison did move to $600,000, but the man just kept walking. The guitar did eventually find its way to the market, however, but with a twist, as its seller was then Amoroso from Cowtown Guitars. Something tells me that a little backdoor deal had been made. Spin-off. It came as a surprise for our Las Vegas boys when the History Channel would launch a not-so-great spin-off of their main show called Cajun Pawn Stars in 2012. According to sources, the network had apparently promised the original Pawn Stars that no spin-offs would be produced during their time being ran. Well, there's not much sense to it, but considering that the original is one of the History Channel's main source for views, it was natural. The History Channel called the new edition a hillbilly southern spin on the original and would primarily focus over some of the most over-the-top items, things like vintage cars, firearms, and even livestock. Well, to no surprise, Cajun Pawn Stars only lasted 1 year, while the original is still kicking with 14 currently run seasons. And frankly, it doesn't look like the show's going to slow down anytime soon.
So, Chum, you think this is appropriate for my pawn shop?
You never have to tow a car again.
It is a money-making machine. It can be
The Robo Dinosaur. Chum Lee really wanted to buy a Robosaurus, a 31-ton dream for kids, but a nightmare for adults. It could breathe fire, transform, and even feed on cars, trucks, and small planes. Now, you may think it sounds just a little bit scary, but being fabricated way back in the 80s, well, Robosaurus probably should be extinct by now. The man selling it would talk big about how they could be making as much as $25,000 a day by renting it out. But there was just one price, a million big ones. It was incredibly impractical, and thankfully Harrison would ignore Chum Lee and didn't bite on the offer. The last known buy for the robot was in 2008, where it would be sold for $575,000. And that concludes what are a few times that the Pawn Stars have been scammed. Feel free to leave a comment below, and one person who leaves a comment may have the chance to win a $100 Amazon gift card. So make your comment good. While you're at it, be sure to subscribe and push the notification button to see more videos like this one in the future. Have an excellent day, and thanks for watching.